And we are live. BuckybadgerW College Game Day coming at you this week. The first one that I'm doing live. I got some good things to talk about. We'll have 3 segments this week. Last week I had some trouble posting it. It might come out a bit later. My big predictions for last week were I had Florida winning against Georgia, which was wrong. But this week we will have predictions again for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. 8 of the biggest games. We'll have the paths for each teams that are really still in the playoff hunt to get to the playoff. And then I'll be talking about who I think has the best offense in college football and the 6 contenders that I think there are. So let's just start out with who has the best offense in college football. And my number 1 candidate for this is the Clemson Tigers. They have 545 yards per game, third most in college football, behind I believe just UCF or Oklahoma and Washington State maybe. They have 398 points scored, not per game, points scored. Most among Power 5, and that's the second most in the FBS. Trevor Lawrence is debatably the top quarterback in college football, and Travis Etienne is debatably the top running back in college football. T. Higgins and Justin Ross, debatably the top wide receiver duo in college football, and then they have a nasty offensive line. They haven't played the best competition. I don't really think that they are. They don't really look like it this year. They don't quite look the part. They're not really dominating offensively against like Texas A&M and North Carolina. These other offenses would. They're not currently, but it's still a really good offense. I think it's probably top 5 in college football right now. Ohio State has scored 34 points or more in every single game this year. Their lowest was 34 against Michigan State. Then they scored 38 against Wisconsin, and other than that, they've scored more than 40 every game. Very impressive. Justin Fields is a Heisman front runner. Kind of a pun there, runner. But Justin Fields, really good passer, really good runner. He's really good at everything. Justin Fields is very good. And then J.K. Dobbins is one of the top running backs in the country. He's extremely good. And I realize we do have one person that is tuning into the stream. I thank you. Can't check on whoever that is for some reason, but I do thank you, whoever is tuned into the stream right now. Everybody else, it'll be up. You can watch it once the stream is over. This is my 4th attempt at trying to stream this, but this is an underrated, or J.K. Dobbins is one of the top running backs in the country. I'm impressed with what J.K. Dobbins has done. He looked better than Jonathan Taylor, to be honest, as a Wisconsin fan. When Ohio State played Wisconsin, I think there were some pretty ridiculous holes being opened up by the Ohio State offensive line. Taylor didn't have those holes. I don't think Dobbins is better than Taylor, but I think he's for sure top 5, and you could make a case. The O-line, like I just said, they've been able to bully really good defenses, especially late in games. Like Wisconsin, they pushed around Wisconsin, who has been one of the top defenses in college football. They pushed them around late in that game. They pushed around Michigan State, kind of. They pushed around Cincinnati, who's actually turned out to be a really good team. They beat them 42-0. Scored 42 on them. Defense, whole different story. And there's an underrated wide receiver core with ridiculous speed. You got Austin Mack, Chris Olave, Benjamin Victor, and then KJ Hill, who is the leader of that receiving core. You have really good receivers up there in Columbus. I'm really impressed with what I've seen from them. And yeah, I'm really impressed with what I've seen from Ohio State. Penn State, for the Nittany Lions, I think that they have a case to be top 5 offense in college football. I guess I kind of haven't finished up with what I was going to say about Ohio State. I think that Ohio State is it one of the top offenses in college football? I don't know if they're the top, like the cream of the crop, or they are the cream of the crop, but they're not. I don't think the exact top, but they're probably top 3, I would say. Penn State, they I think have a top 6 offense. I think they're probably the 6th team on here, but they've had a really, really good offense this year. Sean Clifford, he looks like an up-and-coming star. I really like him. He looks better. Like Trace McSorley, he looked like he was easily going to be the best Penn State quarterback of all time, and he was going to be that for a long time. This year, Sean Clifford looks better. It's been really impressive what Clifford has done. Their RB rotation is elite, running back. Noah Kane leading that, but then you got Ricky Slade behind him. You got some really good running backs there. A good running back stable. You got an elite tight end in Pat Freiermuth, which I don't really think that any of these teams, outside of maybe Oklahoma with Grant Calcaterra, any of these teams really have like a truly elite tight end. And so that's a big advantage that Penn State has on some of these teams. Pat Freiermuth, he can get open on good defenses. And Justin Shorter and KJ Hamler, they're capable of blowing up any game in an instant. They have ridiculous speed. KJ Hamler, at any moment in any game, he can beat any team over the top for a 60-yard touchdown. Really, so can Justin Shorter. That's what is so good about this Penn State offense. They can explode very quickly, and they're capable of blowing up in any half. We have 26 points averaged in the better of their two. Like, if you take the better of their two halves, how many points they scored in that, then they have 0. Or yeah, if you take who had the better half during. Okay, this is hard, but if you take which half Penn State scored more in, and you take every one of those games averaged, like which half they scored more points in during a game. I'm not explaining this well, but then they have 26 points averaged in that, and that just proves, how they can blow up in any instant. Oklahoma, they have scored over 40 points in every game but one, and they have the most yards per game in college football. The one time that they didn't score 40 points a game was against Texas, and they scored 35. So, they scored a lot of points there. Lincoln Riley as a coach certainly helps this offense. Lincoln Riley, Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield they've been the last 2 Heisman players. They've been the last 2 Heismans, and that's because of Lincoln Riley. His offense is ridiculously hard to defend, and that really helps Oklahoma. Jalen Hurts is a Heisman candidate this year. Hurts, very, very, very good quarterback, and there's a reason that he's a Heisman candidate. I think, not to be racist here, but I think he could be a running back at the next level. Like, not because he's black. That's for sure not it. But like when you look at him run, he is a tank. He is so hard to bring down, and I think he's a good quarterback. I don't think that he's a great quarterback at the next level. I think he gets helped out pretty good out there by CeeDee Lamb, and mostly CeeDee Lamb, but also Charleston Rambo, Nick Basquin, Greg Calcaterra. So I don't think he's really an elite quarterback at the next level. I think he's probably a backup, but I think he could be a starting running back, actually, at the next level. And not a Taysom Hill type of player, but like a pretty good running back that could also, you could go wildcat with him, and it could be like, I think Jalen Hurts could be a good player in like kind of a weird role at the next level. I got like a splinter here, but Oklahoma running backs: Kennedy Brooks, Trey Sermon. Their duo is debatably the best in the country. Probably not the the greatest when it just who has the most talent, or who has the most rushing yards, I guess, because then Wisconsin would be better because Jonathan Taylor would have more than both of them combined. But if you look at number 1 and number 2, then they have the top 2 in the country. Or not the top 2 in the country, but they probably have the top duo in the country. They're both NFL draft prospects. They're both going to be playing on Sundays. That really, they're running. When they run the ball, that's really hard to defend. My sticky out there, ow, isn't working. Also, once again, the O-line is elite. Creed Humphrey leads this offensive line, and for the billionth year in a row, Oklahoma's offensive line, best in the Big 12. They're pushing people around. And then good luck keeping up with CeeDee Lamb and Charleston Rambo, along with the rest of that wide receiver core. We also got Jaden Hasselwood, Nick Basquin, Grant Calcaterra, like I already said. And I guess those guys aren't as speedy as Rambo and Lamb, but you can't. There's debatably no defense in the country that can shut those guys down for 4 quarters. Maybe Alabama did it last year, but you don't really see that. And I think CeeDee Lamb is really good. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. I think he should probably be a top 10 pick. And that is, I think the running game really leads this Oklahoma offense, kind of like last year. It's hard to talk for me today. But the running game doesn't really lead the Oklahoma offense. I think the passing game leads it this year, and Lamb and Rambo are really hard to keep up with when you start looking at that passing game. We're down to our final 2 teams. Oh, Oklahoma, I think they're probably number 4 on this list, debatably number 3. We have really good numbers. It's just they haven't really played great competition this year. We are down to our last 2 teams, who are both SEC teams. They're both playing this week. And I think it's pretty easy to guess who I'm talking about. Dang it. Give me a second. Okay, so I'm back. I just went and got a Band-Aid for myself. But Alabama, their next team, they've scored over 40 points in every game that they've had Tua. The one that they didn't was against Tennessee. They lost Tua midway through that game. They probably weren't on track for 40 with Tua, but Tua could have helped them get to 40. Nevertheless, they scored 34. They scored 35 in that game, so that's a lot. Also, Tua is a Heisman frontrunner. Not shocking at all. Tua, I think earlier in this year, I had a video and I talked about how he had like 27 touchdowns and 0 picks. That's very impressive. I don't think he has those numbers still, but yeah. Najee Harris is an elite running back. Like when you look at this Alabama offense, top to bottom, like our next 2 bullet points, we're going to talk about, highlight this even more. But they're elite at every position. They're top 10 in the country at every position. Running back is no exception. We will see. We will see who I think is going to win Alabama LSU. But I will say Najee Harris, as kind of a teaser, Najee Harris has a lot to do with it, with who I think is going to win. And I think Najee Harris is really good. I think he's underrated. I think that he could be a day 2 pick in the NFL if scouts open their eyes. And I think people think that Harris is so high up on my board because Alabama bias. They're not. That is not at all why. I'm in the process. By the way, on the Draft Network account, I'm making big boards if anybody would like to check those out. I also may be making a Patreon, which might have links to my big boards, mock drafts, stuff like that. We will see, but I may be publicating those. Najee Harris, I can tell you, is top 10 on that list, at least. I'm not going to pull it up right now, but he's pretty high up on there. Next, O-line is the best in college football. among the best, I should say. I think that they're debatably the best. Like you got, like I'm trying to think of who else has a better one. Like Oregon might have the best in the country, but I think it might belong to Alabama. Like on the outside, you got Alex Leatherwood, Jedrick Wills. Those guys are elite. The inside isn't as good, but that's a big reason of why they beat LSU last year. Once again, kind of a teaser for what's to come in my Alabama LSU preview. But yeah, it's a very good offensive line, and they're capable of pushing people around when they need to. And then Alabama, not even close. They have the best wide receiver core in college football, easily, not even close. You look, they have probably the top 10 or the top wide receiver. I think it might be CeeDee Lamb after seeing a little more of CeeDee Lamb this year. But it's probably Jerry Jeudy in Alabama. He's probably the best wide receiver in the country. You got another top 10 wide receiver in Henry Ruggs, who's very, very, very elite. You got Devontae Smith, who holds the record for catches or was it like touchdowns, yards for Alabama? I think it was yards. But yeah, he is very good, probably top 25 wide receiver, if not higher. Then you got Jalen Waddle, who might also be top 25. He just doesn't really get playing time at Alabama because the other wide receivers are so good. Nevertheless, that is a very, very, very good team. I'm excited to watch them go up against LSU. Watch those wide receivers like Jerry Jeudy against Derek Stingley, Henry Ruggs against Christian Fulton. We'll see if LSU can shut him down. I think that spoiler alert, I think that they kind of can, but we will see what I think. LSU has put up huge numbers against very good defenses. They have the fourth most yards per game in college football and the second most passing yards. And they scored 42 against Florida. Florida's very good defense. They held Georgia, who's a very good offense, to like 20 points last week. They held Florida to 20 points. They held who else did they? Forgetting who they played in the non-conference, but they very, very good defense. LSU also put up pretty solid numbers on offense against Auburn. Not a lot of teams put up solid numbers on offense against Auburn, and then they put up really good numbers against Texas. It's worth noting that that they put up more points on Texas than Oklahoma pretty easily. They put up 45. I got some other pretty good reasons. The running game is back again. The start of the year, we were thinking like this LSU offense, this passing attack is really good, but if they can't run the ball, then when they play Auburn, when they play Florida, when they play Alabama, they might have some issues. The running game is back. We saw it against Florida. They didn't really like rely on it, like lean on it that much against Florida, but it was really good against Florida, and it's been good their whole SEC schedule, and I think the running game is back with Edwards-Helaire and that offensive line, which that's my next thing. The offensive line pushes people around, like Cushenberry leading them at center, and then everybody else is very good. That is an elite offensive line that they have in Baton Rouge. Joe Burrow is a Heisman favorite. I think he's got to be the favorite right now. He has like passing yards, touchdowns, all the stats that you want to look at, and you just watch him play. There's nothing that he doesn't do well. Like early in the year, Tua probably had my vote. Now it goes to Burrow, and it's not just because Tua's been out. Burrow would have gotten my vote probably over Kyler Murray last year. And then they have elite receivers that help Burrow out. You got Jamar Chase, Terrence Alexander, then you got Justin Jefferson. This is a very good I'm forgetting, for whatever reason I'm forgetting his first name, but Marshall on that receiving core, and Joe Burrow throw it up to them and they catch it and they run with it. Like that is It's not as good as Alabama, not as good as Oklahoma, probably not as good as Clemson, but it's better than Ohio State. It's better than Penn State. It's probably top 5, and I am really impressed with what I have seen from LSU's receiving core this year. I think LSU is the top offense. If I had to rate them top 5, I would go LSU number 1, Alabama number 2, Oklahoma 3, Ohio State 4, Clemson 5, Penn State 6. Then just missing the cut is probably who else even? I don't really know. Oregon, Utah. Probably not Utah, but Oregon would probably be number 7. Not sure. But anyway, that segues into my next segment. I guess it doesn't really. But who has the best chance to get into the college football playoff? Who is still in the playoff hunt will be breaking down their biggest wins, their upcoming big games, what needs to happen, and the verdict on them. So we are starting again right at the top with the ACC and Clemson. Their biggest wins, Texas A&M and at North Carolina, which says a lot about their strength of schedule because Texas A&M right now, I don't think that they're ranked. I don't think that currently they have any wins against teams that are ranked. So that says a lot about their strength of schedule. They got games coming up against teams that are ranked. So chill out a bit on the Clemson hasn't played anybody. But they haven't played a lot of teams. Yeah, and Texas A&M just checked. Texas A&M is not ranked, and oddly, Navy is ahead of SMU. Boise State is ahead of SMU. Cincinnati's ahead of SMU. Oklahoma State's ahead of SMU. Don't really get that. SMU should still be pretty high, even after their loss to Memphis. But whatever. That we'll talk about that later. Upcoming big games, they got Wake Forest, who is ranked right now, number 19. Or Wake Forest is actually, number 19. I knew it. They also got at South Carolina. Once again, says a lot about their strength of schedule and a possible ACC championship. And what needs to happen for them to get to the college football playoff. I think with Clemson's weak strength of schedule, a loss would effectively end Clemson's season, but like their chance to get to the playoff. Because I don't think that Clemson can take a punch and still survive, because you got Clemson, like any Power 5 team that has one loss, I think you have to put ahead of Clemson. Like one loss Georgia, they'd have a lot better wins. They would have won the ACC championship, would have beaten Auburn, or would have won the SEC championship. So they would have beaten either Bama or LSU. They would have beaten Auburn. They would have beaten Florida. They would have beaten Texas A&M, Missouri, Tennessee. Like they would have had some really good wins, a lot better wins than Clemson. Like one loss LSU for sure ahead of Clemson. One loss Alabama, probably ahead of Clemson. For sure ahead of Alabama, or for sure ahead of Clemson, I should say. One loss Oregon. That's probably where you draw the line. Like one loss Utah, one loss Minnesota. I think that's where you start to put Clemson ahead of those teams. But are those teams really making the college football playoff? So I think that Clemson, one loss, pretty much ends their chance. And the verdict for me is Clemson should finish undefeated, and if they do, the undefeated defending champ, they get into the playoff, because then at most you have one undefeated team from the SEC, which is at this point the only candidates are LSU and Alabama. So you would have one probably SEC champ in there. You'd have one probably undefeated Big Ten champ, Ohio State or Penn State, most likely. Possibly Minnesota, not Minnesota, probably. And then for sure, I think Clemson gets in after that. And then what are you looking at? You're looking at Penn State. Are you looking at like the loser of the LSU Alabama game? And they probably get in. Unless Georgia were to win the SEC championship, then they're in. And I don't know right now, but that's what needs Clemson. They should win out, and by all means, they would be in. Ohio State out of the Big Ten. Their biggest wins: Cincinnati and Wisconsin, both at home. Again, not great strength of schedule, but then they have wins against Cincinnati and Wisconsin, who right now are both top 20. And they crushed both of them, so those are pretty big wins for them. Their upcoming big games are they play Penn State, they play at Michigan, and they might play in the Big Ten championship. I think that they will play in the Big Ten championship. Not going to talk about that right now. What needs to happen? Ohio State could possibly afford a close loss, or if they're very lucky, a close loss versus Penn State. And other than that, they have to win out. They can't have 2 losses, and they probably can't lose to Penn State. They probably have to. That Penn State game is probably a must-win if they want to get to the playoff. And the verdict: Ohio State looks as if they win out, and if they do, they will be at least the number 2 seed. I couldn't really see putting them ahead of an undefeated LSU or an undefeated Alabama, because whoever, for sure not LSU, because they would have a lot of really good wins. But then Alabama, they would have beaten LSU. They would have won the SEC championship, would have gone on the road and beaten Auburn. They would have a lot of good wins. So I think they would have to get in over Ohio State. But I think Ohio State will win out, and that happens. They're in the Big Ten championship. Next, we have Penn State in the Big Ten. Their biggest wins are at Iowa and at home against Michigan. Pretty solid wins. Both of those teams are, again, top 20. Not great wins, though. Upcoming big games are at Minnesota, at Ohio State, and then a possible Big Ten championship. And what needs to happen is Penn State can afford a loss at Minnesota if they win out and possibly avenge that loss in the Big Ten championship. And possibly, like I just said, you might be able to look at Penn State. They could possibly afford a loss at Ohio State if things went their way, but they probably have to beat Ohio State, which is the tough part. Penn State, the verdict is Penn State falls just on the outside looking in after most likely losing to Ohio State. But if Clemson loses, then that door is wide open for Penn State. So Penn State, it's not over if they lose to Ohio State, but it's probably over. And then they're the 5th or 6th team, which I guess would be a lot better than what they were at the start of the year. So wouldn't be too mad about that if I was a Penn State fan. Baylor out of the Big 12, they have a pretty good shot at the college football playoff. Their biggest wins right now are Iowa State, at Kansas State, and at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's ranked, I guess. Iowa State is not. Kansas State is number 16, but not too big of wins there for Baylor. Our upcoming big games, they have 3 really big games, possibly. They have Oklahoma, Texas, and a possible Big 12 championship. And what needs to happen for them is Baylor needs to win out, unless possibly they lost to Oklahoma and then beat them in the Big 12 championship. Because if they lost to Texas, I still probably don't see Texas getting to the Big 12 championship. But if they were to lose to Oklahoma and then avenge that, they lose a close one, even if it was at home, they lose a close one and then they avenge that loss in the Big 12 championship, I think they could still get in. But I'm not sure if they do. The verdict is Baylor is a good, not great team. I think they're debatably a top 10 team. The teams I'd probably put ahead of them, I'd put LSU, Alabama, Georgia for sure ahead of them. For sure Ohio State, Penn State. For sure Clemson. And then after that, probably Florida and Auburn. Maybe you put Minnesota ahead of them. Probably don't put Wisconsin ahead of them. You maybe put Oregon ahead of them. No, not where I'd rank them. Right now, I'd rank Baylor ahead of Minnesota. I'd probably rank Baylor ahead of Auburn. But yeah, that's not where I'd rank them right now. But yeah, that's not where I'd rank them. But that's probably where I think they are talent-wise. The verdict is Baylor's. I already said that. They probably lose 2 more games, but never say never. They have been done before. I think they probably lose to Oklahoma and then probably lose again in the Big 12 championship. But then, like I said, never say never. This is don't doubt this Baylor team. This is a good team. They're hungry, and if they win out, they should for sure be in. So I mean, it's not impossible for Baylor, but it's probably a long shot. For Alabama, their biggest wins are at South Carolina, at Texas A&M. Next, not good for them there. It gets better though. Upcoming big games: LSU at Auburn, and maybe the SEC championship. What needs to happen for Bama? Alabama can afford a loss against Auburn if they beat LSU and win the SEC championship, but can't really lose other than that. They could maybe lose to LSU. I could see that happening, but then if they lose to LSU and then LSU loses in the SEC championship game, then I can't really see a path for Alabama, because then you got 1 loss Georgia and 1 loss LSU out of the SEC. They both probably get in over Alabama. You got undefeated Clemson out of the ACC. They for sure get in over Alabama. Then you probably have an undefeated Big Ten champion. So they could lose to LSU. They probably can't, though. And if they were to lose to Auburn and then win the SEC championship, then they still have a win against LSU. They still have a win in the SEC championship. So their resume is still good enough to keep them in if they were to lose a close game against LSU. So it's not, or if they were to lose a close game against Auburn. So the LSU game is big this week. The Auburn game is pretty big. My verdict right now is that Alabama will probably lose one of the remaining games on their schedule, I think. I don't think they're as good as they have been in the past, and I think that loss probably comes to Auburn. But they could for sure win out. I could see that. But it's a matter of what game it is. The prediction is Alabama loses to Auburn, but can survive that and get to the playoff. I mean, now that I think about it, the game for Auburn is not too well placed because it's after the Georgia game. You know, they're coming high off the win against Georgia, and it's the Iron Bowl. Of course, you're going to be ready for it, but maybe you're too hyped up. I'm not sure, but anyway, Georgia is our next team from the SEC. Their biggest wins are Notre Dame and Florida. Their upcoming big games are Missouri at Auburn versus Texas A&M and the SEC championship. Question mark. What needs to happen? Georgia needs to win out if they want to get in, period. They can't have 2 losses. If they have 2 losses, their resume, to me, just isn't good enough to put them in over any 1-loss team. The verdict is that Georgia needs to win out if they want to get in. I think that they lose in the SEC championship game, and they probably have some trouble in the Auburn game. So I think Georgia is a long shot right now, but this is a really good Georgia team, so don't count them out. For LSU, the SEC, their biggest wins right now, they have the best resume of anybody in college football currently. They have wins at Texas versus Florida and at Auburn. Their upcoming big games are at Alabama and versus Texas A&M. What needs to happen? LSU can afford another loss anywhere and still get to the playoff. I think that they can lose to Alabama, and their resume is still good enough, even not getting to the SEC championship, to be a 1-loss team in the playoff. But they can't afford 2 more losses for sure. And that might be tough because they still have Texas A&M after that. But I think LSU, how their schedule pans out, after this. If they can play a close game against Alabama, they're probably in. And I think LSU probably loses to Alabama. Might have just given away my prediction. But their strength of schedule is good enough to overcome it, in my opinion. And I think they could probably be that fourth team, which might not be too good because then they might play Alabama again. And I'm kind of doubtful of LSU beating Alabama this year. But we will see. Teams who need some help are Minnesota, Oklahoma, Auburn, Florida, Utah, and Oregon. And I think those teams aren't out by any means, but they need some help. Auburn, Utah, and Oregon more than Florida, Oklahoma, and Minnesota. Teams are basically out, but not, a miracle could get them in. I think Wake Forest, Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa, and Kansas State are all kind of still in it, but not really. Next we have college score predictions. This is my favorite segment by far. It should be interesting. So the first game that we have up here, Wake Forest at Virginia Tech. Not a huge game. Wake Forest isn't, or is Virginia Tech ranked? No, Virginia Tech is not ranked. Number 19, Wake Forest at Virginia Tech. It should be a good game. It's an important game for Wake Forest, who is quietly still in the ACC Coastal race. Do they have a chance? Probably not. Because they have to play Clemson. If they beat Clemson, then they've got a really good chance. But they're not beating Clemson, I think. How will Wake Forest defense play is going to be a big question in this one. Can they get pressure on Quincy Patterson? Can they get pressure on him? Can they tackle? Can they make plays that they need to make to stay in this game? How will the Hokie faithful show out? This is going to be big because they have to make this a loud environment for Virginia Tech to win. They have to make this seem like Wake Forest. They're a relatively young team. They go into a loud environment. They might be pretty rattled. Can Quincy Patterson be stopped? Probably not. It's a Cam Newton type of player. He's just running over people. He almost led Virginia Tech to an upset of Notre Dame. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he led them to an upset over Wake Forest. And my prediction right now is Wake Forest goes into a loud environment and really gets crushed. I think 31-14 Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's defense, I might have a hard time seeing them allow only 14 points to Wake Forest in Wake Forest, but at Virginia Tech, I think that this crowd makes it hard for Wake Forest to really score. And Quincy Patterson runs all over Wake Forest in this big win for Virginia Tech. Next up, we got Iowa State at Oklahoma. And can Oklahoma's defense come up with enough stops? Caleb Kelly, Neville Gallimore, the stars on that defense need to make plays. And they just have to come up with 3 or 4. Maybe not even that. Maybe 2 or 3. They can't get scored on left and right this whole game. Probably shouldn't be a problem for them, but it's something to keep an eye on if you're an Oklahoma fan. Can Iowa State show any signs of being able to stop the Oklahoma run game? Because if they're not able to stop the run, it's going to be a very long day for them. Probably 50 points being put up by Oklahoma. Kennedy Brooks, Trey Sermon, Jalen Hurts. Tough to stop for Iowa State. That's why I have a really hard time seeing them win this game. And I think Iowa State simply can't stop both Lamb and Rambo for this whole game. I think 3 to 4 touchdowns combined, maybe even more than that. I just think it's too hard for Iowa State to keep up with both of them, and they're not going to be able to. Iowa State must force turnovers on defense. They have to. Because Oklahoma State's going to be able to move the ball up and down the field. They have to force turnovers and get the ball back to their offense quickly. And I don't think my prediction is that Iowa State can't stop everything Oklahoma throws at them, and the lack of playmakers rears its ugly head in a blowout loss. I think it's 48-21 Oklahoma. Probably just some sympathy shown by Oklahoma at the end of the game, not pouring it on Iowa State, but it won't be that good of a game. I think Oklahoma crushes. Missouri at Georgia. Can Kelly Bryant show some big game magic? Really, when teams have beat Georgia in the past, it was basically because their quarterback had a really good game. It's like teams beat the Patriots. Like Jalen Hurts last year had a really good game against them. That's why they won. Tua had a really good game 2 years ago. That's why they won. Stidham had a really good game against them when they lost to Auburn. That's why they lost. Sam Ehlinger last year. I can bring up more and more teams. Probably wouldn't be that nice to Georgia fans. Might be a little saddening for them. Just hearing me bring up all of these names of these teams. I guess Joe Burrow last year didn't have that great of a game, but yeah. Never mind. But Kelly Bryant, he needs to play really well for Missouri to be able to upset Georgia. How seriously will the Dogs take Mizzou? Because if Georgia has their A game ready for this game and they're prepared, they're going to come in and stomp the Tigers. But it's a matter of that because they didn't have their A game against South Carolina. We saw how that went. They lost that game. When they had their A game, we saw it against Florida. That's a really good team. And there's a really good defense. But it's a matter of do they have that. From receiver connection has to be better. Demetrius Robertson, and Cole have to make it easier on Jake Fromm because that's why they lost the South Carolina game. Fromm, like the whole game, didn't really have receivers open at all, and the connection between them wasn't good at all. That's why Georgia lost. It was better against Florida. They didn't really need it against Florida all that much because their defense was playing out of their minds. But on third down, the connection was great. So it'll be interesting to see how good that connection can be, and that if Georgia loses, that'll for sure be what cost them. Does Georgia's defensive front have a hangover game? Because last game they were insane. Florida had like 20 rushing yards. On SEC Shorts, they had a pretty funny joke as a Florida season funeral, and somebody said, "Can we have a 21 rushing yard salute?" I thought it was pretty funny. But does Georgia's defensive front have a hangover game? Because they just got to be able to stop Mizzou. And if they can stop that rushing game, I have a very hard time seeing Missouri win this game. And I think Georgia, they really show up in this game, and they have another dominant game and a beatdown of Missouri. I think Florida flipped the switch in this Georgia team, and they always come out of that game a little better. And I think they win this game 31-13, probably another blowout, and they give them some sympathy points at the end. Iowa at Wisconsin, it's a big game. Not predicting it. Don't want to jinx my Badgers. Not going to do that. Wyoming at Boise State. How will Wyoming backup quarterback Tyler Vander Waal take over for Sean Chambers? And this is some Mountain West action that we were predicting on the channel. We're versatile. We predicted SMU Memphis. Just that video didn't really get uploaded. Not good. But yeah, he has to take over for him well. I don't think he has to outduel Hank Buckmeyer for Wyoming to win this game, but he has to come pretty close. Can Wyoming make game changing plays? They have to. It's like if Georgia was playing Alabama. Georgia has to make game changing plays if they want to win that game. Or Auburn playing Alabama. Auburn has to make game-changing plays if they want to win that game. It's the same thing with Wyoming and Boise State. This is one of the sneaky best games of the year in the Group of Five. because we just talked about Missouri and Georgia. Wyoming beat Missouri. They're one of the 3 teams to have done it this year. I think Georgia went on Missouri went on a 5-game winning streak after playing Wyoming, but Wyoming beat them. The Wyoming 6-2. Everybody knows Boise State is 7-1. It's going to be a sneaky good game. Which playmaking core can make bigger plays? Neither of them are really elite. John Hightower for Boise State's really good, but really, I don't think that. I think that it has a big effect on this game, which playmaking core can get open down the field and make big plays. And I just don't think that Wyoming has the playmakers to compete on the road at Boise State. They don't have the game changers, and I think Boise State wins 27-14. We have 4 games left, and next up we have Kansas State at Texas. And Texas Texas, if they have a good game, they're gonna crush Kansas State. If they have a bad game, they could get crushed by Kansas State. It's just that simple. Texas, they play up or down to their opponents. They almost beat LSU, but then they almost lost to Kansas. So it's just pretty frustrating if you're a Texas fan, but that's just the way that this Texas team is currently. That's going to decide who wins this game. Kansas State is coming in hot. Texas is not. That might have a pretty big effect on this game because is Texas not playing with mojo? Is Kansas State playing with mojo? I don't really think it'll affect this game that much, but we will see. QB running on both teams can win this game. Sam Ehlinger and Skylar Denton, who can run the ball better. We know they're both beasts running the ball. And that might, if one of those quarterbacks has like 100 yards rushing, that could win this game for one of these teams. Texas receivers getting open all the time or getting locked down will win or lose this game for the Horns. Because Devin Duvernay, Colin Johnson, pretty important to this game. Who is going to win? Who can get open? And that leads into my prediction. I think Texas's talent overpowers that of Kansas State, throws them back into the Big 12 championship discussion. 27-10 Texas. I just think they have the better playmakers. They have the better talent. They have the debatably better coaching. Tom Herman coaches well in big games. It's going to be, I think Texas wins this game. Baylor at TCU. Charlie Brewer to Denzel Mims can make or break Baylor in this game. If that is getting shut down, then Baylor could have a tough time in this game. But if it's alive and well, I think Baylor probably wins. TCU home crowd, can it affect this game? And if it can, how well can it affect this game? Can the Texas crowd can this TCU crowd have an impact on 4th downs and stuff like that for Baylor? That'll be interesting to see. Baylor will have to make plays late to win, I think. Because I think this game, it ends up being close. They made plays to win against West Virginia. And that is why, apologize for the sound in the background, but that is why they won that game. If they can't make plays to win against TCU, then that could be a problem for the Baylor Bears. Skill position players in Jalen Reagor and Darius Anderson can make or break TCU, just like Brewer and Mims can make or break Baylor. I think that right now TCU, the big plays from those players could be pretty important for TCU. And I think the big upset of the week is TCU over Baylor. I think Baylor falls in a tight game, 28-24. The line for this game right now is 2.5, I believe, in favor of Baylor. I wouldn't bet that, but I think it's very symbolic of TCU's a good team, and I don't think Baylor's gonna. I think Baylor's gonna take them seriously, but but I think TCU is going to be ready, and I think they're going to beat Baylor. Now Penn State and Minnesota. Yeah. I think KJ Hamler and Sean Clifford should light up Minnesota on offense. I think they should be able to go deep on Minnesota. They should be able to do basically anything on Minnesota. That connection, spoiler, is going to win the game for Penn State. 39 degrees with rain. I'm sitting in Minnesota right now, and it is pretty cruddy weather, but 39 degrees with rain. It's going to be a lot colder than today, or a lot hotter than today. It could play a factor in this one. Is Penn State ready for the rain? I think their ground game isn't as good as Minnesota, and that could win this game for the Gophers if that rain has a big effect in the game. Penn State can overpower Minnesota at basically every position, I think. And Penn State's defense makes plays in bad conditions, overpowers Minnesota's offense. I just think Penn State's offense outscores Minnesota's offense in this game, and their team overall is just better than the Gophers, unfortunately for Gopher fans. And I think Penn State dethrones Minnesota of having a perfect season. They continue their own perfect season. 35-17 Penn State, I think. Now the big game of the week. LSU at Alabama. And I have 8 bullet points, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I have 8. And this is going to be a big game. This has pretty big playoff implications. I think the winner is very much on their way to the college football playoff. They're for sure on their way to the SEC championship. They're very much on their way to the college football playoff, and it's not crazy to think that the loser of this game could get into, but it could be tough. I think the winner of the line of scrimmage is very important in this game, and last year that won it for Alabama. They won the line of scrimmage, and that was a big reason of why they were able to win the game, because they dominated LSU. LSU couldn't run the ball, which is really what they wanted to do. And then LSU just had trouble. LSU just had trouble playing or passing the ball all over Alabama while Alabama was running for 5 yards a carry and LSU was rushing for 1. And those probably aren't the stats, but it's basically what was happening. And whoever wins the line of scrimmage, I think, wins the game. That's how important I think it is. Can LSU somewhat keep Bama's wide receiver stable, quiet? I already talked about the Stingley Fulton wide receiver or corner combo. Can they shut down Judy and Ruggs? I think they maybe can. I don't know if they can, because it's gonna be tough with how the good deep threats they are, and Stingley and Fulton. Not sure if they can keep them shut down for the whole game. Can Saban heavily outcoach Orgeron once again? This is going to be a big part of it, because last year Orgeron got outcoached by a ton. Cookie Monster, as I like to call him, did. And Saban was he outcoached Orgeron, and that is a big reason why Alabama won. Can he do it again? Can Joe Burrow perform under the brightest of lights? Like, he's been able to do it at Texas. Those were very bright lights, but it was against not too great of a defense. He's been able to do it against Florida and Auburn, very bright lights, but those were at home behind his home crowd. This is against Alabama. LSU quarterbacks do not perform well against Alabama. Can he be the first one? Every time when teams beat Alabama, it's because quarterbacks have really good days against them. Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton, Jarrett Stidham. Once again, I'm bringing up Jarrett Stidham. Trevor Lawrence last year. That is the reason why teams are able to beat Alabama, because their quarterbacks go off against them. Can Joe Burrow do that? I think he needs to if they're going to win. LSU needs to keep it close and probably have a lead some of this game. Because if Alabama jumps out to a 14-0 lead and they pin their ears back, they get after Burrow. Like that. That's what happens. That's what happened last year, and it did not end well for the Tigers. We saw that it didn't end well. Alabama won 29-0. That can't happen again for LSU. They can't get down 2 scores. They can maybe get down like 9-0 and then score a touchdown and then they're back in it. But they cannot afford to get down by too much in this game. Can LSU's offense take something off of Burrow's shoulders, like the offense that isn't Joe Burrow? Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Justin Jefferson, this offensive line, like this offense that is so good that we've been talking about. Can they take stuff off of the shoulders of Joe Burrow, because they need to be able to make plays and get downfield if LSU is going to win this game? How will Bama come out of the gates? If they get punched in the gut and are down 14-0 early in this game, then they're also in trouble. I think they're gonna have some pretty big trouble if Alabama can if Alabama doesn't come out of the gates and like Tua's not playing well. I think Alabama can come back in this game better than LSU can, but it'll be bad if they cannot come out of the gates well. Bama, I think they don't lose this game at home, even to a talented LSU team. I think that they show that they are the nation's best team. I just don't like. I think LSU is really good. Like quarterback, LSU has him this year. Running back, Alabama has him. Wide receiver, Alabama has him. Offensive line, Alabama has him. But then defense, LSU has him pretty much everywhere. And I think that LSU is basically on the talent level of Alabama. Historically, Alabama doesn't lose to LSU. I don't think that they lose this game at home. And I think that they win 24-9. I think that their defense plays out of their minds. File that. Keep that to, I will keep that. I will say if I was right or wrong at the end of this week. And I think that this is one of the biggest games of the decade. I think that this is a huge game. Well, this is the end of the podcast. If you enjoyed, leave a like. Let me know that you enjoyed it. Comment. If you disagreed with me or agreed with me, I'd like to get into a discussion with you. Until next time, I'm BuckyBadgerW saying peace out. Oh, and subscribe. I'm BuckyBadgerW saying peace out.